Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure today to welcome to the channel the drummer from one of my favourite Britpop bands of the 90s, from Dodgy, Matt Priest. Hello.
Oh, James.
How are you, sir?
Yeah, good. I saw you. I was a fanboy of you, wasn't I? I saw you at the. I saw you. We were playing. What was the festival called again?
Newton Aycliffe Live.
yeah, Aycliffe Live. And I was sort of looking in the crowd. I thought, I recognise that chap. I think he's the chap from YouTube, isn't he? And you had people queuing up to talk to you. You had about 3 girls around you, all in bikinis. And I thought, I'm doing the wrong thing here.
I think my missus would have knocked him out if that had happened. Yeah, man, that was a great gig. That was so cool. Being in that crowd when you guys were playing, staying out for the summer, playing games in the rain. I was watching you play that in the British summertime rain. It was like the most surreal experience ever. So anyway, Matt, tell me a bit about how did the band start? I've always wondered about the history of Dodgy. Tell us a bit about how you guys were founded and how you guys went from kind of the gigging circuit down south to basically what was, I think, a 6-album deal with A&M Records in 91.
Yeah. Well, me and Nigel were from the Midlands. I met him there. We're in a band together there. He turned up as an audition for singer in the band. The band was called Sensation of the Mind. We were into the Cult and U2 and that kind of stuff back in 85. And Nige turned up. Back then he looked amazing. He was like, 6 foot. He had Billy Idol hair. He had leather trousers on, and he looked like perhaps a rock star, you know what I mean? And we hit it off straight away because we both loved the album, Infected. And he was really surprised that this kid who was a bit younger than him, who didn't look like I was into indie, was into the. That's what we bonded over. Nigel made a massive sacrifice, really. It was he had a job. His feet were under the table. He, as most people did in sort of South Birmingham, a lot of people worked at Austin Rover, which was a big car plant there. Nigel, John Bonham from Led Zeppelin were from Redditch, and that town was built as a satellite town for Austin Rover initially, to house all the workers. And Nigel was there. He had a good job there. He had a fiance. He had a house. He had a car. He was well on the way to that life, and I think that's what Staying Out for the Summer was about. When he was there at Austin Rover, a lot of the old fellas that had been there a long time were saying, "Get out, man! Get out while you can, or you'll just be stuck here." And I think Nigel took that to heart and turned around to me one day and said, "Look, I'm giving everything up. We're going to London." And I'm like, "My mum thinks I'm going to university," and. And he said, "No, man, let's try it. Let's go for it." And so it took me a few months to convince my mum. I wore her down. And that's it. And we set off for London together.
Wow. How old were you at this time, Matt?
I would have been 18. I think
wow.
I was 19 or 20. 88 we went down. And then by 1990, so about 18 months, we'd met Andy. And then within a few months, we were signed. It was like
wow.
That. But you're saying about 6-album deal like it was a big thing. Everyone back then had 6-album deals. It was right. There was a lot of money around in the music industry at the start of the 90s because it was still really lucrative.
That's really interesting. So that line from Staying Out from the Summer, I work in a factory, I don't want to be late, I've got my bills to pay for, save me from this race, I think it is. That's about Nigel working at Austin Rover.
Yeah. It's specifically about that, about getting out of that, getting out of working in a factory and working in Austin Rover and getting down to London. And, that's it. Oh, yeah, very much so.
After you guys got signed, your first album was actually produced by Ian Broudie from the Lightning Seeds, right?
Yeah, well, before that, when we got signed in 1990, 91, it was very, very uncool to be on a major label. The music journalists did kind of rule what was cool and what wasn't. And if you were deemed uncool, you wouldn't get a look in, really. We were essentially from that kind of stock of Indie Enemy, Melody Maker, that kind of band. We weren't overtly commercial band. So what we did, and a lot of bands did it at that time as well, we signed a major record contract, but we said, leave us alone for a year. Let us release our own singles on our own indie label. So they gave us some money for an indie label, and we released 3 tracks, quite experimental tracks that we released there, and they were on our own Boston label. And they were produced by Paul Schroeder who was the engineer for the Stone Roses. Oasis and Blur very much did the same thing. You know, they signed to Blur signed to EMI, but through Food Records, who were an indie. Oasis, as we know, signed to Sony, but through Creation.
Yeah.
You know. So after we did that year of releasing 3 indie singles, the majors went, right, you come on, smacked our asses and went, come on, let's come into the studio now. Let's you stop fucking around. Do a proper record, you know. And they wanted a proper producer, and Ian Broudie fitted it. You know, we loved the stuff that he was doing with the Lightning Seeds, and of course he produced Echo and the Bunnymen, and he produced Icicle Works and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's cool. I've always been curious about Ian because he's a bit of a mysterious character in some ways. You don't see him out in the media, you know, slamming some rival band or anything like that. He seems like quite a kind of reserved guy. What's he like as a person? He's
amazingly headstrong. He knows what he knows. I'm like, I'm not quite sure about that. You know what I mean? I'm quite easygoing and I could be swayed, and he's a bit of a leader in that sense. And he knows what he likes. He knows what he wants and goes for it. And that worked for us because we weren't necessarily. We were a bit wishy-washy, as I said, but we pulled from all these different places. So there wasn't a definite sound. There wasn't a sound that we weren't sure what we wanted to sound like. We just knew we were writing good songs, and we loved the people. And also we loved the Roses as well, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, we loved Primal Scream because they were coming out, and we loved Screamadelica and Stereo MC, so we loved that kind of sound as well. So we loved a lot of contemporary stuff as well as a lot of the older stuff, but we weren't quite sure how it was going to be packaged and how it was going to sound like. And Broudie had more of an idea than we did. He sort of stamped his idea on it more than we could because we weren't so sure. I think by the second album, we'd found our feet. We'd found the sound that we wanted because we've been on the road for so long. So we went into the studio with Hugh Jones for the second album, and we knew the sound that we wanted to get. We didn't quite know it on the first album. That's why Broudie helped us do that, you know.
That's interesting because you guys have got such a signature sound now. When I listened to your new album recently, you flipped it on, I was like, instantly, that is just immediately, recognizably Dodgy, just instantly. So you definitely found your sound.
Thank you. Yeah.
As you know, my channel has quite a big focus on Oasis, and you guys gigged together, didn't you, in the early days?
Yeah, I think the first time they played with us was at the Academy in Manchester. Or the Academy 2, or the Academy 3. It was the Hop and Grape, the one at the top. It's called the Hop and Grape. I don't know. It's the one at the top anyway. And they supported us there. And I was doing something, or I was caught up doing something. I only caught the last couple of tunes. Stupidly, I should have gone and had a look. But yeah, obviously you watch me go, wow, yeah, okay, I get this. And then they're all sharing a dressing room together. And quite intimidating. They were nice, they were dead lovely, but there was a gang of them.
Yeah.
You know, scally manx. And they also had the real people with them as well. And we sort of knew the real people anyway from Liverpool. And then I saw them down at the 100 Club in London. It was starting to really kick off for Oasis, sort of partway through that tour. Tiny venue. And I think it's where it kicked off. It used to kick off a bit. But you just got it. You just knew. You know, I mean, I'm 10 meters away from Liam, and you just knew they got it right. The music was relatively quiet to his voice. They got his voice absolutely louder than anything, and then the music was secondary. So they knew they knew get the sound man, make his voice the loudest thing in the room, and then have this wall of noise behind it. And he just had that stare, and he had those eyes, and you just knew. You just think this can't fail. I remember when I first heard about when they first came out as well. I was hearing rumours about, you know, that they were like the Roses but mixed with the Pistols, you know. And because I was still quite a bit naive, I thought you can't copy the Roses. You can't have someone being about like the Roses. You got to find something new. You've got to move on. And how wrong I was, you know. It's we at Pentecost again when I think we were probably promoting So Let Me Go Far from the Homegrown album, and they would have been promoting either Shaker Maker, I think. And it was there was sort of a few dressing rooms around a green room with this big glass table, And I remember it was all kind of quiet. I mean, then we heard the fucking. And we're like, oh, what? Popped out of dressing room, and Oasis were there, and we're talking. This was, afternoon as people were getting ready for the, sound checks and all that kind of stuff. Oh, didn't stop them. Big glass table, racking stuff out on the table, and you're like, whoa, okay, all right. And drinks were had and whatnot, and we played and they played, and then Liam ended up in our dressing room, and I've said this story before. It's just really interesting because you've got a stage persona and everything. And, they were just about to go. That was like, bang, I'm just on that curve there. They were just about to go stratospheric. And Liam was, I wouldn't say insecure at all, but reflective and questioning. And he was asking us lots of questions. I suppose he was, I don't know, looking to up as I don't know, people who've been around, for a little bit longer than Oasis had. He was asking us questions and he had a little bit of doubt about himself or whatever. And so he was, and I've said it before, but he was almost like a pussycat. He was a lovely, gentle fella, very, very nice, very polite, mannered. Well, this is what Noel told me. He said, I went into the rehearsal and I played Water Under the Bridge from your first album. I said, if these fuckers can do it, we can fucking do it. So I wouldn't say it was an influence. I'd say it was maybe a stick to beat the band with. And just to say, if them fuckers can do it, we can fucking do it. I think because we had done an album of essentially British pop tunes in 1993, so we got there a little bit before. And I think Oasis had said, right, yeah, now's our time. People are doing what we're doing. The Roses, Dodgy, Suede obviously were coming out at that time as well. Gem, who was in Heavy Stereo, we were real close friends with him. We knew him. He was sort of part of the gang that we used to hang around with in London. And then he got the gig, He got the gig in Oasis. So that was a strange one as well, A bit of a life-changing moment for him.
So that's really interesting what you said about the 100 Club, because there seems to have been so many major players in the British record industry who were at that kind of what's become a bit of a legendary Oasis gig. I spoke to Gaz, the drummer from the Happy Mondays, and he was at that gig as well. And his impressions were exactly the same as yours, which is fascinating. He said that, they were really impressive, but he was concerned that they were too based on the Manchester movement that had just gone. And that's fascinating that you said another drummer from another major 90s band was at that gig and got the exact same impression.
Yeah, I've met Gaz. He's a lovely fella. I met him once. We'd done a gig with the Mondays, and we were in the bar afterwards. And he was like, I bet you can't tell who my favourite drummer is. I bet you can't tell. Nobody can. And I went, I said, is it Pete DeFreitas from Record the Bunny? He went, how the fuck did you know that? How the fuck did you know that? And I went, because you go, and he went, they're surprisingly nice. You always expect the Mondays to be quite scary, but they're not. They're always really nice people.
So you guys, in the early days, you all actually moved into a house together, didn't you, down south?
Yeah. We and me and Nige moved out to Hounslow West. We had a fantastic time there. We got some really interesting people living with us. We had an author from South Africa. We had a Christian from Australia. That didn't last long. His Christianity, that is. We'd have chats right into the early hours, just chatting. Really, really good. Putting the world to rights. And that's where we met the Bluetones. And they weren't the Bluetones at the time. Me and Nige were a bit enhanced, say. And we're at the window, and we saw Mark and Scott, who we didn't know were Mark and Scott, walk past in their parkas, because they were obviously well into the Stone Roses and all that kind of stuff. And we took the piss out of them out the window, and they were like, back. And then we started the Dodgy Club in Kingston, which was a couple of miles away from Hounslow. We started our own residency, basically, because back then you had to pay to play in central London, which is bullshit. So we started our own residency, and they came down. I think the first or second week, they'd heard about it on the grapevine that this club had started that was playing baggy stuff and hip hop and dance and Osrix and loads of 60s and Jimi Hendrix and Happy Mondays. And, it was a really great little club. And then we advertised ourselves playing at 10 o'clock. So it wasn't about us, it was about the club. And by the second week, it was round. And we recognised them. We were like, oh, shit, sorry, lads. And they were like, oh, no worries. And they came back to our house and found out that they were into the same kind of music, same kind of recreational activities that we were. And that was Mark and Scott. And then we met Adam. Right. And they were in a band at the time called the Bottle Garden. They decided that they were going to sack the singer and Mark was going to sing. And they were playing us some of the tunes. Mark sort of played me, I think he played me Blutonic and Slight Return in the kitchen. And they said, look, when the singer comes around, you've got to go along with us that the band are splitting up. And so, and everyone was sad. And then the singer left. And then that was the formation of the Bluetones.
Right.
There and then. But I've got Eds in the band, the drummer. And I think Eds was really crucial to their sound because he swung like a hippo's bollocks. He was...
Seriously, mate, if that's not the title of your next album, there's something wrong with the world.
But yeah, and that was great. So it was good times. It's lovely to see the Bluetones go on and get success as well. Because as we got signed and we started to get busier, we would move out one by one. And as we would move out one by one of this house, a Bluetone would move in. And then eventually it was taken over completely by the Bluetones, and I think only Andy was left. Andy, our guitarist. I think they didn't know he was there. I think he was in the loft, and it took them a few months to realise he was still there.
So, Matt, tell me a bit more about the club nights that you guys set up as a band down south. That sounds like an absolutely fascinating idea. It sounds like a lot of work, but a brilliant idea as well. You guys basically set up a club night, playing all that kind of music, at the end of which you guys would headline, and that was kind of a strategy to build your following. Would that be right?
Yeah, it was a no-brainer in a way. It was, the best ideas usually are quite simple. But we had pay to play in town, and we had to play some shithole venue in central London on a Wednesday night, and we didn't know anyone in London. We were expected to bring people down, pay the promoter 50 quid, and he'd give you, 50 photocopied crappy tickets that we were supposed to sell and make our money back. And that's how it worked. But we didn't know anyone. The whole idea is that you're hoping to play with someone to pick up a following, that their followers could then see you, that's kind of how it worked. But we thought, no, this ain't working. This is rubbish. We had to get ourselves to town. We'd be playing literally to two people and a dog, and it was horrible. And we just thought, well, no, a lot of our bands that we love from the 60s, the Who and the Stones, they had residencies, the Who at the Marquee and the Stones at Eel Pie. And we thought, fuck it, we'll do that. And so we went to Kingston. We based the poster on the old Who, the same typeface as the Who at the Marquee. And we would put the Dodgy Club, and then we would play. We would list all the acts we would play: Stone Roses, Sly and Family Stone, NWA, Osric Tentacles, The Clash, blah, 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 the Beatles, blah, blah, Stone Roses, blah, blah, blah. We would just go on. All stuff that we were into that we would play ourselves. In our house in London, in Hounslow West, there was a guy that lived with us who was a DJ. And so that was easy. He would DJ, and then we would go on at 10 o'clock. You know what I mean? It was a club. It was a club getting the people down. And it was great. And we bit, and it was rammed from the pretty much the first week we did it. I think we did it bi-weekly. And so whenever anyone from the industry wanted to come and see us, they'd have to come down to see us in Kingston. That day we wouldn't go to London, into London, as it were. They had to come and see us, and we charged them double on the door.
I mean, that really is a brilliant strategy. So many of my old kind of rock and roll heroes from the 90s, like yourself, who I would sort of ask how it happened. A lot of it was kind of almost by chance, but the way you guys did it is fascinating. That is like, that could work today. So if there's a band in London, of which I know half a dozen, who are desperately trying to get a foothold and build a following, what a brilliant idea. You got a DJ playing all the rock and roll indie hits that they love, and then the band is on at the end as a residency. That could work today, and there's not many strategies that worked back then that could work today. That one really could.
Well, it was a no-brainer, and it certainly worked. It certainly worked. There's people who come and see us today. I saw someone actually in the summer at one of the festivals, and she came up to me and she goes, "Oh, you remember me?" And I was like, real vague, kind of, I mean, I hardly remembered last week, And she went, "Yeah, I used to come down to the Dodgy Club." And other people that see us regularly that used to come down to the Dodgy Club, and then we moved the Dodgy Club into Carnaby Street in central London because it was a thing then. The Dodgy Club was a thing that people wanted to come down to, so we kind of toured the Dodgy Club, but for a tool for building up a fan base and just building up our vibe of what we were about. It was a no-brainer. It worked brilliantly.
I mean, that really is genius. Was that the brainchild of you and Nigel by any chance?
Yeah, pretty much. A genius is not genius, but is comes out of necessity. We just didn't want to play those gigs in London. It was really disheartening to go and play gigs at the Lady O in Arms, which is a real shithole of a gig in Finsbury in London, and to nobody. You know what I mean? And just a bit hostile and crap. And it's like, well, this is not what it's about. Why don't we just fill a place full of lovely, beautiful hippie kids and hippie girls? And that was it. And what was interesting, because we were in Kingston, there was another band called, God, I wish I could remember their name, but they turned into Kula Shaker. And we had a gig off at the Richmond Ice Rink. They brought their fans down, and we brought our fans down, and we played that, and they were a very weird thing at the time. I think because he's connected with John Mills, and Hayley Mills is his mum, John Mills is his uncle, and so there were some weird characters hanging around him. Crispin clearly could play guitar, and clearly, he knew what he was doing. But he had a guy next to him, I think might have been his mum's boyfriend, wearing jodhpurs and riding boots, who would hold up the Sun newspaper and whip it with a riding crop, which I don't know, not sexy to me personally, but I mean, I like the sentiment, fuck the Sun, but I wish I would. Objects of Desire they were called. That's the name, and that was pre-Kula Shaker. So they were over in Richmond doing their thing, and we were in Kingston doing our thing,
Right. And so obviously, out of that club scene, you guys got signed, you built a massive following. And let's talk a little bit about your kind of commercial peak as a band, which was probably 96, where you had a top 10 single and a top 5 album. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, overall, we had 12 top 40s. But back then, Good Enough got to number 4, and the album, I think, got top 10. It went crazy, because tabloids got involved, and you get invited to all the crazy parties, and the screaming starts. I remember we did this gig after Good Enough. I think it was the first gig after Good Enough had hit. There was real proper screams, like Beatles screamed, and we'd not heard anything like that before. And that was really weird, I always felt like a tourist. I never felt like that kind of adoration was what was meant for us. I don't know, it's a bit more gentle than that. So yeah, the screaming was a bit weird. And because Andy, very good looking, and he had to have security because people would be pulling at his hair and all that kind of stuff.
You must have some great memories from being right at the heart of the hurricane, if you like, during the Britpop movement. You guys were right in the dead centre of it all, weren't you?
Yeah, but we never felt part of it. We never felt part of it. I think because we never knew about it. We rode that wave. We rode that wave, Absolutely. If people want to come down to the gigs and think we're part of the movement, yeah, that's fine. But we never did. We never courted it. I mean, our first album was released in 93 before it was even coined. So we never felt part of it, I mean, yeah, definitely there was a really exciting scene happening. I mean, there was an exciting scene happening in the film industry. There's an exciting scene happening with the comedy, and we certainly see a lot of the characters out and about at clubs in London. I mean, there was the Fast Show lot. Oh boy, I'd end up in a certain pickles and certain situations with certain people from the Fast Show, and Martin Clunes and people like that. And I'd sort of end up in situations with them more than other members of other bands, and it was a real special time. There was it was great. It was there was a lot of happiness and positivity around.
So if you could pick one gig from the 90s that was the summit, the greatest live moment of Dodgy, what would it be?
I mean, there's so many. I mean, we played at Mile End when Blur did that one, but I can't really remember that. We were invited to play with Oasis at Nebworth. We were doing a gig for a charity over in Sarajevo, so we turned down Oasis at Nebworth. Glastonbury '95 was a good one. Channel 4 were broadcasting live, and we opened. And it's on YouTube now. You can find it now. Dodgy Glastonbury '95. And Nigel says, "Welcome, Channel 4." And then we start staying out for the summer. And it was blistering hot. I mean, you can see the crowd was huge. It was mental. And after that, because the Roses were supposed to play that year, but John Squire had done his collarbone. And so Pulp did it instead. And we did our gig. And we'd have loved to stay around, but we jumped in our tour bus, and I think that was on a Friday. And the Saturday, we had to play the Zenith in Paris, which is a big 9,000-seater arena supporting the fucking Cranberries on a European tour, which was a real kind of, it was like, all right. I mean, they got some killer tunes in the early days, Dreams and whatnot, but it was very strange. There was no partying going on. So we were off the high of Glastonbury and, hey, come on, and Staying Out for the Summer was in the charts. And then we were sort of like playing these big, massive arenas around Europe with the Cranberries, and it was just a very strange vibe.
So the band lineup has changed a couple of times throughout the years, hasn't it? Towards the end of the 90s, I believe Nigel kind of did some solo stuff. If I'm allowed to ask, was there any kind of fallout or anything, or was that just a very peaceful separation for a while?
No, it was. I mean, it was. Well, we have three-piece essentially, but we've always had other musicians with us. I think when we did Glastonbury '97, we had 11 people on stage.
11, really?
Yeah, fucking we did. Three-piece horn section, 3 girls singing, keyboard player, and we had a guy doing percussion, a guy that we met in Bosnia. Some lovely.
Sounds like Dodgy's High Flying Birds.
Ridiculous. We had no one doing scissors though. We weren't communicating as well as we did, me and Nige, and we drifted apart a little bit socially. And he had a kid, so his priorities changed a little bit. I look back on those times and I don't regret it, but I just think, shit, if only we'd have just gone, let's just take a break for 6 months. It didn't, and it split, and it was silly because we built up to that thing, and it split up very quickly, and it wasn't nice. It was horrible, and then we limped on with another singer that wasn't Dodgy. He was good, and he was a good songwriter. He had a great voice, Dave Bassey, but it wasn't Dodgy, and we shouldn't have called it Dodgy. It's difficult. It's difficult to be objective, to stand back and to go, no, this is what we need to do. That's what needed to happen. We just needed to give a bit of time. Time's a great healer. Time is a great healer, and we sort of forgotten what we were arguing about or what the problem was. And of course, the offers started coming in for us to get back together, and we eventually did that in 2010. We did a sort of reunion tour. And we had those dates planned, and then the day before we were due to go on tour, Andy Miller, our guitarist, he slept on a camp bed, which was like quite near the ceiling. He had to climb a ladder to get up there, and he fell out of bed, and broke his fucking arm, and we had to cancel all those dates. No, that was 2008. That was 2008, and then 2009. That's when his arm healed. We rebooked the dates and we went back out. And we very, very soon realised that we had unfinished business and that we were getting on and we had tunes. And then we got back in the studio, the three of us, and did Stand Up Right in a Cool Place, which stands up as a phenomenal album still. We love that album. The fans really loved it. It got really good reception.
Well, I love the new stuff. What's next for the band?
Well, we've just had our busiest summer. We're going over to Guernsey. Woohoo! Then we're going to Dubai with the Stereo MCs. That's going to be fucking great. We've written some tunes. Nigel's always writing. But the problem is because he's always writing, he never finishes things. You know what I mean? So I think it's my job to go in as a contractor to go and, you need to finish that, build that wall, and help him finish stuff. And I've kind of always done that. I mean, Skin from Cast, who's a lovely fella, he lives quite near Nigel now in Wales, and he's got a studio. And he said we can go up and record at his place. And our fans are always asking for new stuff because we are getting on really well. I think we should probably take advantage of that, and the fact that we've got a couple of bangers already written.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on, mate. It's been brilliant to talk to you. You and the guys in Dodgy were definitely some of my childhood musical heroes. So it's been a massive tick on the list for me to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, James.